Hello and welcome back. This is episode 47, and in today's episode we will be sending out our lander to dock Pol and then land the vessel on Pol itself. Now let's begin by heading to the J series vessels and our J2C, which we recently updated in the last episode at the end of it by adding more improved power banks and some radioactive isotopic generators, some RTGs, some nukes to help out with the power issue that we've been having with this vessel. Now, let's go ahead and set up our crew for the mission. We're going to use the red shirt crew, Azalea, Millman, and Helwig, and then we are going to launch this from the Mun, which I already have the transfer window for the Mun to Joule transfer already prepared in advance, off camera in between the episodes today. But hopefully with these new power improvements, the vessel will perform a lot more nominally, and we will have much more control and less time being wasted trying to reorient the vessel in between each stage of the transferring. And again, the goal today is to send this out to Joule orbit, rendezvous up with the station around Pol, dock up, and take care of the rendezvous, docking, and transfer between the two vessels' accomplishments and contracts, or potential contracts. And then we will land this on the surface of Pol. Let's begin and take off from the Mun launch pad, make our way up to 50 meters per second, and then go full sideways, while keeping an eye on our power reserves. Now that we have made those improvements, we're close enough to 50 meters per second. I'm going to go ahead and start to go sideways. Looking pretty fantastic on our electrical chart. So we definitely took care of that problem. And if memory serves me correctly, that was the only problem that we really had out of this vessel. Now that we are completely sideways, I'm going to lock the SAS there. And it's going to take us a minute to extend our apoapsis out to 50,000 meters. I'm going to take advantage of this moment in time to open the docking shield and extend these solar panels. Rising steadily at about 10,000 now. Should be up to 50,000 momentarily. Probably will have to stage before we reach that point though. So keep an eye on the G-force meter and the apoapsis. G-force meter just went down. Let's go ahead and stage. And we'll boost forward just a hair to get away from those, and then head back to the map view. And finish extending that apoapsis out to 50,000. Looking good on that staging. Keeping an eye on that apoapsis, and we'll zoom out. Well, no, we'll do that here in a moment. So it'll take a lot of time for this to reorient itself to the prograde mark. I'm going to warp ahead to be about 2 minutes behind that apoapsis and have it set to lock back onto prograde upon arrival. While it's doing all of that, I'm going to zoom out and find Joule back over there. and set it as the target. There we go. Now it's just a matter of waiting for the vessel to reorient back to the prograde mark. This is where all the extra power and the nukes are going to come in handy, as this is usually about the time that we start having problems because we only had the 100 charge power banks radially inserted into the capsule at radial 4, giving us very limited power and only 2 solar panels. No nukes, which presented a lot of issues using this vessel in the past, up until we got through the lower stage and the midsection, leaving just a lander staging itself. At that point it was fine, but up until that point it definitely wasn't. But we definitely solved that problem. So after we reach the prograde mark, we'll go ahead and wrap ourselves around the mun. In fact, okay, yeah, we just need to make orbit first, and then we'll transfer to the dark side and make our way out to Joule. I'm still just going to let it go ahead and get a little closer to that prograde mark before I warp over just a wee bit closer to the apoapsis. Because it is taking a good bit of effort for this vehicle to reorient itself with just the reaction wheel. Right now, even after staging, it weighs 907.5 tons. Alright, we're fairly close to the prograde mark. I'm going to go ahead and time warp until it's about 30 seconds away to save a little bit of time. And by the time it is locked back onto the prograde mark, we should be right on top of that apoapsis for a very short burn to finish circularizing around the mun. About halfway there already. Very much in keeping with the standard launches that we have been doing for many of these missions now. Should be very familiar with this process. Unless you're jumping ahead. But still. Let's go ahead and throttle up just a wee bit. In preparation to starting to go full throttle. The closer we get to the apoapsis being at the 0 mark. And waiting for that to wrap around. There we go. Now it's time to time warp over and transfer to Joule. Just waiting for that alignment at the edge of the orbit. But it is going to take some time to get back to the prograde mark, probably about 1 minute. So, about a minute away from that point, right about here I'd say. I'm going to cancel the time warp there, and let it reorient to the prograde mark. I'm not going to use any monopropellant, never know when you're going to need that for something much more important. Especially if you saw the Tylo mission, where we ended up having to use the last of the monopropellant reserves to finish off the reorbiting of Tylo. Didn't go quite as well as it did in the testing stage, where it made it to a nice stable, I want to say 100,000 meter orbit around Tylo, and still had several hundred delta V remaining. I'm not sure why it didn't go that way in the stream, but nonetheless, we still got that mission completed. And it looks like the target mark is exactly where we want it to be relative to that prograde mark. definitely solved the power issue. Now that we're on the dark side, we have no energy flow from the solar panels. It's all RTG, and we still have plenty of power. So I'm very glad that that was a very easy fix that we should have done a long time ago, but it's done now. Alright, we are locked onto the prograde mark. Let's begin to slowly throttle up to full throttle. And we should end up having to stage well before we make it out to Jules' orbital line. So I'm just going to keep an eye on the vessel and get a nice view of it for now until it's time to stage. And then we'll go back to the map view and take it from there. Some lights for the landing stage wouldn't have hurt this either, but oh well. It would have been cool to light this vessel up, especially now that the power issues have been handled. I'm going to go ahead and turn those lights back off though. Time to stage here in about 8 seconds or so. At which point we'll get rid of the 2 remaining outer stages and go full ascension. Probably should have cut the engines first, but let's see what happens. There we go. Move away from those nice and smoothly. Throttle. And let's go to the map and check out where we are heading. Should be out past Terra, if not close to it. About halfway out to where Terra's orbital line is. Still a good ways to go. But I'd say there's definitely enough delta V in this stage to get the Joule encounter narrowed down. But frankly, I am very much looking forward to getting rid of this stage. It's very strange, isn't it? Not sure how that works. It makes you think that. Let's check the readout on this stage, find out how much burn time there is. 90 seconds of burn time at a very low frame rate right now. Certainly going to be more than enough. Alright, now that we're out beyond Terra's orbital line, it should not take too much longer to get that Joule encounter. Increasing in altitude at about 1 billion every few seconds. On our way out to close to about 60,000. Or less. Depending on how accurate this transfer window is. closest approach node, if possible. There we go. Bring it on. Bringing that one on. 3, 2, 1. And let's get out of the Mun sphere of influence so we can see what that is looking like. There we go. Ooh, very nice line. Alright. Let's go ahead and try to bring that in a little closer. Let's go top down since it's already pretty much in line where it needs to be on its orbital insertion degree of inclination. It's not that bad at all. Let's try to stop that right over top of Pol. A little closer if possible. There we go. And let's update the quick save. Locate the ascending node. Point ourselves anti-normal in preparation for that. There you are. And not too much to burn off. I'm going to wait for that to line itself up with the anti-normal mark. Update the quick save. Manually time warp ahead just a little bit and then auto warp over to that ascending node. Fairly close. Just a few seconds away now. It's close enough. I'm going to go ahead and do the warp. And in anticipation of the ascending node disappearing after we leave Kerbin's sphere of influence, I'm going to get that as close as possible to that ascending node and then warp on over. Let's see if it disappears after we leave Kerbin's sphere of influence. Yep. Okay. So we're going to have to eyeball this. Let's put our focus back on Joule. And then once we have arrived at that node, or presumably where it would be, we will keep an eye on that ascending node readout. We can't necessarily go by that per se, but it will be close. And we're going to keep an eye on our periapsis over here and get Joule's orbital line flush with itself. Let's disable the comm network so we can see a little better. And then we'll bring the periapsis down to Joule's line here. So we need to make absolutely sure it's flush with itself. Looking good. Alright, so now we just need to wait for it to reorient itself completely locked onto that anti-normal mark. It shouldn't take too long since it's already so close. And hopefully there won't be too much thrust. And hopefully it won't rapidly bring it down. We'll slowly throttle up now. Looking good. Just burn until we bring that periapsis down. Right on top of that line. It's off a little bit right now because of the frame rate where the vessel is so large and the part count is so high. When I launched it, it was sitting at about 426 parts. Like this time up here, right? Okay, it's almost right on top of the orbital line. Zoom in to get a little bit closer of a view, a little better view. As soon as it's right on top of that line, I'm going to cut the engine. The ascending node is reading at 0. I think all is well. Now, it is a little down past Pol's orbital line, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and set Pol as the target. And then manually time warp ahead just a wee bit. And then auto warp out to that ascending node. And we are already pointing anti-normal, which is fantastic. Let's go ahead and warp out there. This is going to take a few minutes. This time I am going to take a short break while this warps. We'll be right back. In the meantime, enjoy some tunes, and once I return, we will correct that ascending node, and then make the Pol encounter, and head off to dock up with the station in orbit around Pol, and then initiate the Pol landing. I will be right back. have and play the same game that you're talking about. Is it called Spaceflight Simulator? Gonna go ahead and highlight the ascending node and exit time warp mode so I don't affect that time warp. That's the game that actually led me to Kerbal Space Program about a year ago. It's very fun. Good to play one away from KSP too. There are a few games I like to play, like mobile apps, namely Spaceflight Simulator and Terra. Terra is a very cool game similar to games like Surviving Mars. I like to play KSP and Surviving Mars at home, and when I'm out and about and I can't play KSP or Surviving Mars, I can play the mobile versions of them pretty much. Spaceflight Simulator and Terra. There's certainly a lot to learn in that game that can really prepare you for KSP, but also that KSP doesn't teach you either. Like, the first time I went to the moon in Spaceflight Simulator, I learned that it's best to do the return burn to make it back from the moon to Earth on the side that's facing the Earth, which was very useful to know to save Delta V and have more efficient missions to the moon here in KSP. I haven't played Space Engineers yet. I played a demo of it, but I haven't played the full game. It looks really fun though. A lot of the people in the KSP console community play it too. I've watched a lot of Let's Plays of it. Really want to try it out one day. It looks really fun though, like having to build your own ship and being able to make it into orbit, and it just looks more in depth in the build system. Kind of reminds me of a crossover between KSP and like games like No Man's Sky or Elite Dangerous. Very much like a crossover between KSP and No Man's Sky though. It does look very complicated in the control aspect. Looks like there's a lot to learn and get down to be able to really do a lot in that game. And after you progress from being on the surface and everything that you have to learn once you reach space and go into other worlds and so on. Where is Joule? So we are in the Joule system now. Should be right about there, yeah. And now that we have arrived, it's time to go ahead and do this ascending node correctional burn. We're already lined up with the anti-normal mark, which is fantastic. So now we just need to finish warping on over to the ascending node and burn those 3.5 degrees off. Manually time warp ahead over to it. Once I'm close enough, trying to make sure that I don't lose the node this time either. I'm gonna zoom in a good bit closer, get a better view of it. See how much I can get away with burning at this distance before it starts to move away. How much delta V is remaining in this stage? Decent little bit. Definitely enough to finish correcting this node. I'm going to cut the engines and time warp ahead just a wee bit more. I think we have plenty of time and room to work with. Alright, let's see what the throttling does now. Much faster. There we go. Let that go down to about 1.5, maybe 1, maybe even less. Don't want it to get too far ahead of us though. We're too close to that periapsis just yet. What we were trying to pull off in the last episode, but stuff happened. 3, 2, 1. Okay, now I'm going to time warp as close as possible to it and finish that off. Oh, okay, kind of passed it by a little bit. Let's let that wrap around. There it is. Okay. Oh, it's a 0, so that's good. Now we just need to make our way over to the periapsis, reorient to the retrograde mark, and set up this encounter. So we are in a fantastic position to be able to do that. Let's manually time warp ahead once, and then warp on over to that periapsis, or close to it at least. I'm going to let that reorient to the retrograde mark, and then finish warping over to it after it does that. Well, it would probably help if I select the retrograde mark. There we go. Get a good view of the vessel and orbit around the jewel while it's doing this. Still quite the hulking beast with the remaining central stage and this entire midsection. Certainly over-engineered, but I aim to do that in every episode, just to try to help. Some of you watching in the future may need the over-engineering that I do, or you may not. Alright, we're pretty much on the retrograde mark. Let's go ahead and warp on over closer to the periapsis. And in anticipation for what we're about to do, I'm going to highlight the escape node. Let it finish locking all the way onto the retrograde mark. Then I'm going to go ahead and time warp over just a wee bit closer to that periapsis, about 30 seconds away or so. And let it lock back on more accurately to the retrograde mark, and slowly begin to throttle up, keeping an eye on that jewel escape. Should have enough delta V to make this capture burn. We'll see. Idealistically, I would love to get rid of this little bit remaining in the lower central stage, just to get rid of that stage. It's a bit heavy. There it goes too. Fantastic. Let's stage. And we are free of that burdensome load. Much more thrust to weight now. close to 1700. And our orbital velocity around then, it'll be time to stage. Get rid of those first two outer stages and the midsection here. All of these are mainsails, by the way. They should be. Very good. Gotta keep an eye on the G-force gauge while we're in this map view, though. There they go. It is time to stage. Let's get rid of those first two outer tanks. And slowly throttle up, moving away from those. Back up to full throttle. And we have our orbit. Now we have to keep an eye on our closest approach node there as we burn this down, looking for an encounter. Don't want to burn it down too much, or we will lose the encounter. We have to warp around a little bit due to our position relative to Pol. Let's just keep on burning for now, though. We have a little bit of fuel to play around with. Figure out the most optimal approach here. Alright, so once we have that periapsis down on top of Pol's line, right about there, let's warp out to that periapsis, and upon arrival, let's point prograde. Should be pretty much locked on the prograde once we arrive at that periapsis. But once we arrive, we're going to extend the apoapsis back out and get the encounter that way. I believe that was the idea in the last episode, but didn't quite go as planned. But we can extend our vessel's line out beyond Pol up to us by the time we get back to the periapsis, which at that point will be the apoapsis. It should be much easier to get the encounter. How's our delta V looking though? About 565. Alright. Which will put us at about 1800, 1900 when it's time to stage. Alright, let's highlight that node. See if we can't narrow this down a little better now. Just need to extend it out past Pol's line. And we'll see about narrowing that down. Still not working out for us. Alright, let's warp out to the apoapsis. We'll just have to do this the way that we did last time. That's much closer together there. We can try to play around with that here at the descending node. Might have to do a little bit of radial burning. Let's try radial out first, since we're so close to it. Let's get rid of the comm network lines. Get a cleaner look here. And we can just push our orbital line around. See if we can't nail this down. Looks like it's going to have to be radial in. We can give that a shot. Ironically, much more control of the vessel, which is fantastic. Very glad to be rid of that bottom stage. Alright, let's get that line highlighted again. See about bringing that on home. Let's go ahead and start to throttle up. Okay, so that's bringing the periapsis out more than it needs to be. Let's try a retro burn. We're still close enough to the descending node for this to maybe work. let's start the throttle up now. See if we can't get that node back. Very good. There we go. That's what we were looking for. Let's bring that down below Pol's orbital line. Just enough to get this encounter. Alright, now let's focus on Pol, sorry. Let's see what we have. Coming in from the correct side, very good. Looks like we just need to burn normal a little bit. Or is it anti-normal? I believe it's anti-normal. Not really sure. I guess we'll find out. I believe we're under going into Pol. We might have to point normal. But we'll give this a shot. Let's deactivate these outer engines. And then put the thrust limiter on that central stage down a bit. I'm going to put it down to about 10% or so. Let's see if we can't work that periapsis down. Okay, so it is going to have to be locked on to normal. Let's go ahead and set the station as our target now as well. It's close to 50,000 on the periapsis already, which is fantastic, because that is indeed where the station is in orbit. Let's try to line the station's orbital line flush with itself, and then we will burn down until we're a little closer to that. As soon as that periapsis hits that mark, we're going to cancel or cut off the throttle just a wee bit more. Guess that's as good as that's going to get. We can go ahead and point anti-normal and advance and do some very quick maneuvering here. We will have less than a minute to do the ascending node correctional burn upon arrival, and then rapidly go from that to a retro burn at the periapsis. We'll go ahead and get ourselves lined up in advance for that. Put the thrust limiter of the mainsail here at about 33%, that'll work. And let's update the quick save and warp ourselves over to the ascending node. We'll begin by manually time warping ahead just a little bit, and then warping fairly close to that. And we have arrived at Pol. Let's focus on the vessel, hit the 2 sticks in, highlight that ascending node, and let's go ahead and see how much we can influence it. Not wanting to push our luck too much. How far are we from the periapsis? 47 seconds. Once we're about 30 seconds away, we're going to try to correct that node as much as possible. And then very rapidly reactivate the 2 outer engines, put the central stage thrust limiter back to full capacity, and burn retrograde at that periapsis. Gonna have to move pretty quick. So we're about 30 seconds away. Let's try to correct that node as much as possible now. 3, 2, 1, 0. Alright, let's get those engines back online and get that thrust limiter back up and point ourselves back to retro. still have at least 10 seconds or so until the periapsis. As soon as that hits that retro mark, we're going to go full throttle. And go. Let's check our staging. 200 delta V. And we have orbit. Let's cut the engine. And let's set up this encounter. It's going to be moving really rapidly. We need to go ahead and cut these engines back offline again, and then set the thrust limiter on that central stage back down again. We'll put it down to about 7.74. That'll work. We're going to be eyeballing the intersect 2 node, trying to move it in line. 0.5, not bad, we'll take it. Let's update the quick save. What's our relative speed going to be though? How much are we going to have to burn? 43.8 meters per second. We'll keep the 2 outer stages off, and we'll set the thrust limiter back up to about 33 or so. And now, let's re-highlight this, manually time warp ahead once. It did not affect the separation, very good. Let's warp on over to that. About a couple minutes away, preferably. That'll work. And now let's see what we have to work with. Let's exit the time warp mode. And we are a minute and a half away. Let's make sure that we are in target mode. You can see the station back here, 3.8 kilometers away. Are we in the space high above Pol? If so, we need to grab some science if possible and try to get that out of the way. Hopefully we will remain in the space high above Pol at the 50,000 mark, so we can finish getting the science if we don't take care of it right now. Just have a couple more things to grab. Need to grab the temperature reading. Just need to get a better view of it. Let's close this shield. And then we need to EVA our scientist out there to get the EVA report. And should be safe to actually go ahead and try to collect all this before getting back in the vessel. We'll give it a shot. Let's grab this EVA report and then find out how close we are to the station now. 2 kilometers. I really want to play it safe, but I really want to grab this science. Let's grab the crew report. Let's grab the gravity data. Mystery goo data. Not going to worry about resetting that. Focused on grabbing this stuff right now. Just need to grab that temperature log and then get back in this vessel and hit the brakes. Alright, let's get back in here. Let's make sure that we are locked onto the retrograde mark, and it is time to retro burn. Bring it down to about 15 meters per second. I'm going to finish what I was doing with that scientist now as we get closer to the station. Now, why does it feel like I'm being krakened? Let's restore this mystery goo and see what's going on. Alright, let's get back in here. Feeling a bit of a kraken crawling up on us. Usually happens whenever you rendezvous vessels here anymore. I'm going to open this shield, turn on the lights. Once we're locked back onto the retrograde mark, I'm just going to wait for that vessel to be directly behind the center of this vessel. Put the camera pointing just like this. As soon as it's in the center point, that's when I'm going to kill off the rest of this speed, because we will be as close as possible in this approach at that point. Getting close. I'm going to go ahead and throttle up just a bit. Work it up to full throttle until it gets very close to the 0 meter per second mark. Just going to wheedle it on down to 0 meters per second relative to the target. And there we have it. Alright, now it's just time to dock up. So let's point ourselves at the target mark, make sure we are controlling from the docking port. Then we will move in on our target vessel. Let's go ahead and slowly start to throttle up. Bring it up to about 2.5 meters per second. Point ourselves back to the retrograde mark. Should have plenty of time to point ourselves back at it. Once it's there, I'm going to update the quick save and then warp nice and close over to the station. Slow ourselves down. And then dock these two vessels up. And we are locked on to the retrograde mark. Let's go ahead and update that quick save. Let's bring it on home. Don't want to get too close. Let's bring it in just a wee bit closer. And about there should do it. Let's go ahead and start to kill off that speed a bit now. And go back to the target mark. And while that's doing that, I'm going to control from the docking port on the station. And then set the docking port on our lander as the target. And then set it to automatically lock on to the target mark as well. And once those are lined up, I'm going to switch back to the lander, which will lock it into SAS mode, which is where we want at least one of these vessels, while the other one remains set to target mode. But before we do that, I want to make sure that the solar panels are lined up correctly. Looks like I need to rotate this vessel just a wee bit, like so. Groovy. Alright, now let's swap back to that vessel, go to docking mode, and then enable the RCS, make sure we are in linear control mode, and start thrusting forward towards the station until we see a prograde mark pop up on our nav ball. Now we just need to make sure it stays lined up. We also need to make sure that the docking port on the station is in fact what the target is set to. Let's try to get a good view on that. it'll allow it. There we go. Just saw that we are able to highlight it, so let's find out where that was. It's been playing hard to get. There we go. Alright, let's make sure that that is our target. There we go. And then let's correct that prograde mark until it's nice and centered properly on the target mark. We can increase our speed just a little bit. We'll increase it to about 0.3 because it is going to take a few seconds to burn that back off due to the size of this vessel and the lack of more than 4 RCS thrusters. Let's go ahead and set our camera aim on the docking port. Now is that our light lighting that up? Okay, it's its own lights. Or on the day side anyways, we can see everything just fine. The panels are indeed pointing away from each other nice and evenly. That's good. Everything looks pretty fantastic. As we begin to deaccelerate, the prograde mark is going to move around a little bit. I need to make sure to keep that corrected here in linear control mode, or linear control mode and docking mode, which can be swapped between it and rotational mode by hitting X. But you want to stay in linear control mode for this. You never want to activate rotational control mode with RCS on. It'll mess up your trajectory line using the RCS. But staying in linear control mode, we are starting to close in on the station. Let's make sure that prograde mark is staying corrected relative to the target mark. Let's begin to slow down just a little bit. Bring it down to 0.2. Prograde mark is still looking good. Once we're a few more meters closer, we'll bring the speed down to 0.1. By then we should have a little bit of correcting to do to the prograde mark. Looks like it's already starting to require that correction a little bit. Okay, let's go ahead and bring it down to 0.1 meter per second. Once we have that velocity, let's move that up just a hair, and we can deactivate the RCS and the SAS and let it take over. We'll go to staging mode. Looking pretty good. And we are docked. Now we just need to transfer the crew between these two vessels. You can do that by highlighting the hatch and then hitting square or X on the Xbox. And then we'll transfer Hellwig onto the station. Definitely didn't need to EVA. Let's try that again. Alright, let's highlight the hatch, open the menu, and transfer Hellwig onto the station. Now we just need to find the crew hatch on this module on the station, and we can transfer Hellwig back. That'll knock out transferring between two vessels in orbit around Pol. So let's check our accomplishments. We have performed a spacewalk in orbit of Pol, constructed the first station around Pol, docked around Pol and transfer between two vessels around Pol. So that knocks out everything but the science from the space near Pol, which I don't believe we are near Pol or near enough right now. So we may have to grab that on the way down. I'm going to extend the episode for the landing. Maybe. I don't know, maybe better to do the landing and the return in the next episode after a short break. I think I'll go ahead and do that now that we've knocked out this leg of it. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to cut this, take a quick break, come back, and we will do the landing and return from Pol in the next episode as a finale. But for now, we have knocked out almost everything for the space around Pol. Just need to make sure to grab the science from the space near Pol on the way down in the next episode. So I'm going to update the quick save, and then update the main save, and that'll wrap up this episode. Take a very short, quick break, and then I will be back for the Pol finale. But for now, thank you for watching. Hope it's been helpful. Hope you've been enjoying the journey so far, and I will see you all again shortly. Goodbye.